The wind tore through the desolate landscape like a living thing, shrieking through jagged cliffs and frozen trees. Snowflakes stung Ilara's face as she stumbled forward, each step heavier than the last. Her small boots sank into drifts deeper than she could see, and her ragged cloak offered little protection from the merciless cold. The village she had called home, her parents, her friends, was gone. Burned, shattered, abandoned. And now, so was she. Her teeth chattered as she tried to make sense of the storm. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, shapes that vanished the instant she blinked. Wolves? Ghosts? Or something worse? The wind carried a faint sound, almost human, cries, whispers, but it was impossible to tell over the roar around her. A sudden gust nearly swept her off her feet. She clutched a frozen branch for support, her heart hammering. And then, she saw it. A massive shadow moved against the whiteness. Too big to be a wolf, too deliberate to be a trick of the light. It glided through the storm, powerful and terrifying, and for a moment, she froze, unsure whether to run or surrender. Then came the roar. It split the air, vibrating through the snow, shaking the very ice beneath her feet. And in that sound, Ilara understood something horrifying and miraculous. She was not alone. The storm showed no mercy. Snow whipped into Ilara's eyes, freezing her lashes together. Her tiny hands were red and raw, and her feet felt like blocks of ice. Every step forward was agony, but she had nowhere else to go. The village was gone, reduced to blackened timbers and smoking ruins. The people who had promised to protect her, neighbors, distant relatives, had vanished, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Ilara tried to call out, her voice barely a whisper over the raging wind. "Hello? Anyone there?" Her words were swallowed instantly by the gale. She sank to her knees in the drifts, chest heaving, and pressed her frozen fingers against her face, trying to warm them with what little body heat she had left. Hours, or was it minutes, passed in a haze of cold and despair. The world had become a blur of white, of icy wind and the occasional snapping of a brittle tree branch. She could no longer tell up from down, left from right. The storm had erased everything familiar. And yet, she kept moving, dragging herself forward through the blinding whiteness. Then she noticed the tracks. Footprints, fresh and enormous, pressed into the snow ahead. Her heart jumped. Maybe someone had come back for her? Maybe, rescue? She staggered forward, following the prints, but the wind howled louder, masking any other sound. The tracks suddenly stopped. Ilara froze, scanning the snow, straining to see through the storm. And then the realization hit her like a physical blow. She was completely, utterly alone. The humans she had relied on were gone. She had been abandoned. Her chest tightened. Fear clawed at her throat, sharp and relentless. Tears froze on her cheeks as she sank to the ground, shivering violently. The wind didn't just bite, it screamed in her ears, threatening to erase her from the world entirely. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold onto the last warmth of her tiny body. Through the storm, something moved. A shadow, larger than any human, more deliberate than a wandering wolf. Ilara's breath caught. Her first instinct was to run, but her legs were stiff with cold. She crouched low, trying to make herself smaller, hoping whatever it was would pass. Then it roared. A deep, bone-rattling roar that split the air and shook the snow around her. Ilara pressed her face into the drifts, heart pounding in terror. She had never heard anything like it. The sound was alive, filled with power and danger, and yet, something else. Beneath the fear, there was a strange, almost comforting warmth hidden in the roar, like a flicker of fire in the storm. The shadow drew closer. Massive wings cut through the snow, sending arcs of frozen powder into the air. Ilara's eyes widened as she caught sight of the creature's silhouette, massive and majestic. She expected claws, teeth, fire, but instead, it stopped. It did not attack. It hovered over her, wings beating against the wind, creating a dome of relative calm in the raging storm. She wanted to scream, to beg for help, but no sound escaped. The creature's gaze fixed on her, eyes glowing faintly in the storm. They weren't just looking, they were assessing, almost, understanding. And in that moment, Ilara understood something she could scarcely believe. This wasn't an enemy. Somehow, some impossible miracle of the storm, this creature had come for her. Her fingers trembled as she reached out instinctively, almost afraid to touch it. The wind raged, the cold bit harder than ever, and still, the massive shadow hovered above her. It was her only chance, her only hope. And yet, even as relief began to edge into her panic, a new fear gnawed at her. She had no idea what this creature was, or what it wanted. Then it made a low, vibrating sound, almost like a purr, almost like words. You are not alone. Ilara's heart skipped. She couldn't tell if it was speaking or if the storm was playing tricks on her mind. But one thing was certain, she was still alive. And in a world that had forsaken her, that was the first gift she had received in what felt like forever. Ilara's teeth chattered so violently she thought they might shatter. She crouched low in the snow, arms wrapped around her knees, heart hammering in her chest. The massive shadow had hovered for what felt like eternity, wings cutting through the storm, heat radiating against the cold like a sun trapped in ice. And then, it moved closer. The wind whined against her ears, snow stinging her cheeks, but Ilara could see it now. The dragon was enormous, scales glinting faintly like molten metal in the flashes of lightning from the storm. Smoke curled from its nostrils, and its eyes, golden, intelligent, and piercing, locked on hers. She had never seen eyes like that. They weren't just predatory or wild, they were aware. Watching. Curious. Ilara's mind raced. Should she run? Could she even run in the snow this deep? Every instinct screamed to flee, yet something held her in place. The dragon lowered its massive head closer, and with a careful, almost reverent motion, it exhaled a gentle stream of heat over her. The cold bite of the storm eased slightly, and for the first time in hours, Ilara felt her frozen fingers thaw just a little. It was alive. It was breathing fire, and yet, it didn't burn her. The dragon's wings shifted, the massive membrane stretching out to either side, creating a protective barrier against the storm. Snow melted where the wings beat against the ice, forming a small circle of warmth around Ilara. She couldn't believe it. This creature, this living force of nature, was shielding her from the storm instead of harming her. A voice, or something like a voice, echoed inside her mind. Soft, deep, and reverberating, as if the words themselves carried heat. You are not alone. Ilara froze. She hadn't expected words. But somehow, she understood them perfectly. They weren't spoken aloud, they were in her thoughts, clear and insistent. She wanted to scream, to shout back, but fear and awe held her silent. The dragon tilted its head, nostrils flaring, eyes never leaving hers. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, through her chest, through her very bones. The roar was no longer a threat, it was a question. An invitation. Tentatively, Ilara raised a trembling hand. She had no idea what she was doing, but something inside her told her it mattered. The dragon didn't flinch. It lowered its massive head until their foreheads were almost touching. The heat from its scales radiated through her coat, her skin, her very soul. And in that moment, the world fell away. The storm still raged around them, the wind shrieking, the snow blinding, but inside the dragon's gaze, Ilara felt a strange, fierce calm. She was frozen in awe, but not with fear. Not entirely. A sudden crack in the distance snapped her back to reality. Something was moving through the storm, something darker, slower, deliberate. Predators, or perhaps something older, lurking in the white wasteland. The dragon's eyes flicked toward the sound, then back at her, and the warmth in its gaze hardened into resolve. It was protecting her. Ilara swallowed, her frozen lips parting slightly. You're helping me, she whispered, unsure if the dragon could hear, but needing to speak anyway. A deep rumble rolled from the dragon's chest, like a chuckle, like agreement, like promise. The dragon's wings shifted again, folding partially around her, shielding her from the snow and wind. Heat radiated through her frozen body, melting ice from her hair, her clothes, even her fear. Ilara realized something almost impossible. In a world that had abandoned her, that had left her to die in the storm, this creature, the dragon, had chosen her. And in that choice, she found a spark of hope. A spark that might just be enough to survive the night. The storm showed no mercy, but inside the dome of warmth beneath the dragon's wings, Ilara felt for the first time in hours that she could breathe. The dragon lowered itself further, its massive wings unfurling like a living wall of fire and shadow. Snow hissed and melted wherever the edges brushed the ground, steam curling upward and creating a swirling fog around them. Ilara shivered violently, the cold still gnawing at her extremities. But when the dragon nudged her gently with its snout, the heat from its scales washed over her, searing away the numbness in her fingers and toes. Her body sagged, exhausted, as if she'd been carrying the storm itself inside her chest. Tentatively, she leaned into the heat. The dragon didn't move away. It simply lowered its massive, flaming wings around her, encasing her in a cocoon of warmth that radiated like a sun trapped in the ice. The snow around them hissed and evaporated in clouds of steam, leaving a small sanctuary amidst the blinding storm. Ilara's lips trembled as tears ran down her cheeks, freezing almost instantly against her skin. She pressed her face against the dragon's side, marveling at the steady, living heat. For the first time in days, she felt safe. Not just alive, but safe. The dragon's wings wrapped tighter around her, shifting slightly as though adjusting to her small frame. Ilara's frozen heart felt something new, a fragile, trembling hope. Her parents were gone, her village destroyed, and the humans who had promised to protect her had abandoned her. Yet here, in the most impossible of circumstances, she was not alone. She lifted her gaze to meet the dragon's eyes. They were fierce, golden, and alive with intelligence. It wasn't just a creature of fire and scale, it was aware, and it had chosen to save her. A connection sparked between them, unspoken but undeniable, binding them together in the storm's chaos. Then the roar came again, not the gentle hum of warmth this time, but a deep, trembling growl from the distance. Ilara stiffened, the heat from the dragon's wings providing a comforting contrast to the fear coursing through her. The shadow in the storm was moving closer, deliberate, patient, and dark. Something more dangerous than ice and wind. The dragon's wings flared outward, flames licking the edges, steam hissing violently as the heat met the cold. Its eyes snapped toward the threat, muscles coiled like steel. The creature's intent was clear, it would protect her at any cost. Ilara clutched its wing instinctively, feeling the rough scales beneath her fingertips. "Whatever it is, it won't touch me, will it?" she whispered, voice shaking. The dragon rumbled, a sound that vibrated in her chest like a promise, and she understood. It wasn't just heat that wrapped around her, it was protection, strength, and trust. And in a world that had turned cruel and cold, that trust was a lifeline. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed. The storm continued to rage beyond the walls of the dragon's wings, but inside, the two of them were a world unto themselves. Ilara's frozen fingers began to regain feeling. Her breath came in slower, steadier pulls. She could think again, plan again, survive again. Yet even as warmth seeped into her bones, the darkness at the edges of the storm loomed. The growl from the distance persisted, slower this time, deliberate, patient. Whatever it was coming. And soon. Ilara hugged herself beneath the dragon's wings, listening to its heartbeat rumble through the ground and into her chest. She realized, with a strange mix of fear and awe, that she was not just being saved from the storm, she was being saved for something else. Something greater. And as the dragon's fiery wings curled around her, shielding her from the world's cruelty, she knew one thing with certainty, she would never be alone again. The storm finally began to relent, though the air was still sharp and biting. Snow swirled lazily around them, no longer a raging white tempest but a quiet, drifting frost. Beneath the dragon's wings, Ilara felt warmth that wasn't just physical, it was a strange, profound comfort she had never known. She lifted her head and looked up at the dragon, tracing the curve of its massive neck, the shimmer of molten gold scales, and the steady, intelligent glow in its eyes. It had saved her. Not because it had to, not out of obligation, but because it had chosen to. And in that choice, Ilara felt something blossom in her chest, trust. A fragile, trembling trust, but trust nonetheless. Slowly, carefully, she reached out a hand and ran her fingers along the dragon's jaw, feeling the warmth radiate through her frozen skin. The dragon lowered its head, nudging her gently with a soft, rumbling vibration. It was a gesture of companionship, of recognition, and it made her heart swell with awe. For the first time since she had been abandoned, Ilara felt that she belonged somewhere. She had survived the storm, survived the abandonment, and survived the icy wilderness. And now, she had a companion who was unlike anything she had ever known, yet somehow completely familiar in its steadfast presence. They stood together atop the cliff, the storm receding to reveal the jagged, frost-covered landscape beyond. Snow-capped peaks stretched into the distance, and rivers of ice glimmered in the pale light. The world was harsh, unforgiving, but it was theirs to face, together. Ilara's lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you, for saving me." The dragon rumbled, a deep, resonant sound that felt like both laughter and affirmation. It lowered its wings further, wrapping them around her again in a final, protective embrace. The warmth from its scales seeped deep into her bones, and she realized something extraordinary, she no longer feared the cold. She no longer feared being alone. Then, on the horizon, a curl of smoke rose, thin and distant, yet undeniably deliberate. Ilara's eyes narrowed. Something was coming. Something not of the storm, not of ice or snow, but of fire, shadow, or worse. Her chest tightened with both excitement and fear. The dragon's wings shifted slightly, as if sensing the same threat. Its golden eyes flicked toward the smoke, then back to her, and Elara understood perfectly. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. She took a deep breath, feeling the heat of the dragon's body seep into her bones, the steady rhythm of its heartbeat beneath her hands, and the courage that had been buried deep within her stirring to life. "I don't know what's out there," she murmured, "but I know we'll face it. Together." The dragon rumbled again, a sound like fire meeting stone, a promise that resonated in her very soul. The bond was formed, unbreakable in the face of whatever the world could throw at them. For the first time, Elara felt truly alive, and truly powerful, not because of strength or magic, but because she was no longer alone. The sun, pale and trembling, finally broke through the storm clouds, casting light across the icy landscape. And for the first time in her life, Elara smiled, not a smile of relief, but of hope, determination, and the certainty that a new journey had begun. In the distance, the smoke twisted and churned, a silent warning that the world was not done testing them. But Elara, wrapped in the dragon's burning wings, no longer feared the unknown. Together, they were ready. And in the quiet aftermath of the storm, the orphan and the dragon stood side by side, bound by fire, ice, and the unshakable promise of a new beginning.